Why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and the creation of this new MMI Alumni Association you started?
Okay. My name is Chris Taylor. My friends call me GodXilla. I am from Milwaukee, music engineer, music producer, songwriter. I have the decent benefit of being able to wear a couple of different hats in recording studios. I have the ability to write a record within an hour, music and lyrics, and record the whole thing, as well as engineer the record on a caliber that is competitive nationally. Not many people can do that. Either they're songwriters or they're engineers. There's really not a lot of middle ground for a lot of people. Like, they may be really good at the instrument, but they can't produce a record. So I possess that ability. I'm an instructor at Madison Media Institute, as well as a studio owner in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I am also a student in the EMB program at Madison Media, and I began the Alumni Association. The Alumni Association it's a way for us to build our network as Madison Media graduates and extend our network nationally, globally, however you like to look at it, so that we can network and build more opportunities for our own as we move along the country and travel around. Because a lot of us leave here as freelancers, and as freelancers, that's cool, but the more people you know, the more freelance work you can get later on, especially if you're somebody that can.
What got you interested in recording music? I mean, have you always just had a love for music, or did, one day you just...
I always had a love for music. You got baby pictures of me. I'm like 3 years old with a pamper on, or 2 years old with a pamper on. Hopefully I wasn't still 3 with a pamper. But say I'm 1.5. And there weren't pampers then. There were diapers. And you had the diaper service come pick the diapers up.
The cloth ones, right? Right on.
So let's say I'm in a diaper, and you can see the diaper hanging out of the back of my corduroys, and I'm sitting at an organ at that age. Or you got pictures of me 4 or 5 years old singing solos in church at that age. So when I was 14, somebody took me to a recording studio, and I've pretty much been there ever since. So, but for my first look at a recording studio, it was 2-inch tape, and I ended up doing some drum programming for a song that did a little bit of decent rotation in Milwaukee called Lady Melody back in like the 80s. So this is about 86, and from the time that I went there, I was bitten by the bug in 4-track, 6-track, 8-track, ADAT, and I couldn't afford the ADAT, so I bought, it's a funny story, in the 90s, I couldn't afford ADATs, which people may not know. ADATs were tape decks. They looked like VCRs, but you could record 8 tracks to them digitally. You could link up to 8 ADATs and have 64 tracks in one rack. Wow. And then you could line them up with a big console and run. $2,000 a piece, these machines were. I was like 20, early 20s, 22, 23. I couldn't afford that. So the person who took me to the studio when I was 14 showed me all the way up from 4 tracks all the way up till I was 21, 22, how to run that stuff. When he got ADATs, it's like, nah, I'm not going to teach you these. And those prized possessions, which, every bird must leave a nest. So I couldn't afford the ADATs. So what I ended up doing was calling every recording studio and every software vendor, so Best Buy, American, anyone who has software, I was calling them saying, do you have software that allows my computer to act like a track machine? Nobody had ever heard of it. And then I called a guy who actually used to be an instructor here by the name of Jeff Taylor, who owns a studio called Taylor Pro and was in Milwaukee. And he said, yeah, we run Logic. And at the time, just so you know how long ago this was, he said, it's my dream to see this recording studio record 64 tracks at once. Now you can do 192. He said,
so it's come a long way.
We can do about 28 right now, and I have a dream to see 64 tracks running here at once one day, right? And so so since the mid-90s, I've been looking at multi-tracks on computers. While everybody was buying ADATs, I started looking at multi-tracks on computers. Well, here you go 15 years later, 16, 17 years later. Now everybody's asking me, how do you read these tracks? I can pretty much tell you what words are saying just by looking at them on the screen. And a lot of people don't possess that ability because they haven't been looking at them as long as I have.
So you kind of self-taught yourself?
Yeah.
In the beginning?
Well, in the beginning, yes, I totally self-taught myself, as well as with the gentleman whose name is Daryl Thomas, who first took me. But I reached the point where I was really good and I was working professionally in Milwaukee, but I wasn't growing any. So this is a great story. What I did to move forward was I was on tour with a guy by the name of Cuckoo Cal, who had a song entitled In My Projects. It was a really hot song. He and I were on tour together. We were doing a players ball in Minneapolis. And there was a gentleman there by the name of Shorty B. Has a company called Dead Eye Productions. Shorty B was at one point in time a member of EU, if you remember the record Doing the Butt. He also played with Parliament Funkadelic from time to time. Him and Eddie Hazel and Mike Hampton from Parliament Funkadelic had a group at one time. He left to go to the Bay Area, where he did a lot of work as Too Short's producer, and did a lot of work with Digital Underground, and him and Tupac were good friends when Tupac first came out, as well as did a lot of work with Digital Underground. He was at this players ball, and he and I met, talked it up, and I said, man, I'm not growing where I'm at, can I come to Atlanta? He said, yeah, sure, come on. He didn't know, but the next day I went home, I packed it, I went to Atlanta. I took the money from that show with Cal, and I took it, and went to Atlanta with it. And I found myself when I went to Atlanta in the studio, not only with Shorty B, but with Organized Noise. Sleepy Brown and Rico Wade at Rico Wade's house in the actual dungeon, the Dungeon family, in the actual dungeon where they were recording a record for Ludacris at the time. Ludacris wasn't there, but they were writing it and later came out on the Ludacris album. So my travels through there taught me how to look at music production as its own business, as its own entity. So I really grew with those guys and understood the art of production and keeping the program moving. Then in about 2005, I ran into a guy by the name of Keith Clizart, who did a lot of Snoop Dogg records on No Limit. And Keith and I, we met a couple of times, but we had most of our conversations over the phone. Keith gave me a lot of conversation and knowledge about upping the sounds that I use, to the point where now I'm making libraries for Big Fish Audio, whereas Keith makes the Platinum Essentials series for Big Fish Audio. Between Shorty B, Keith, and another guy by the name of Big Fuzz, who just gave me concepts to go home and practice, my sound quality elevated. The final point where I really got a lot of schooling from was Sean McMahon, who's a teacher here, sent me to find a gentleman by the name of Danny Leak in Chicago. And Danny would just evaluate mixes for me. And this is when I was a student here. So I was great in Milwaukee. People look at me as a standard. I take this stuff to Danny, and he'd just kick my teeth in every time. And I was taking tracks down there to get my teeth kicked in to find out how can I improve. And I was just going every week, and every week he'd just kick my teeth down my throat, every week. Finally, till I got to a point where I got down there, he said, yeah, this is what I'm talking about. This sounds good. And that got
That's the day you were waiting for.
And that got me to where I am. So now I'm just focusing on how to master a record on the back end and make that sound the best I can, as well as being a member of AES, studying Pro Tools till I'm blue in the face, keeping up with the trends that they have on that, and doing what I can to be the father / big brother / uncle / cousin to the students that I can be around here, because I know a lot of them is their first time leaving home. So through all the music, as long as I keep the students in front of the music, I'll be fine. But it's students' music and then,
So, on the end note, what's the best advice you can give to, say, a student right now, or somebody that you meet up with, and they got some chops for it, but maybe have no official training? I mean, what kind of advice can you give to somebody?
The best advice I can give them is to shut up. In drug rehabilitation, they have a saying that says, take the cotton out of your ears and put it in your mouth. The one singular problem I find that students have that usually blocks their learning and their elevation of their skill level is they don't know when to be quiet. They don't know when to be quiet. And a lot of times people who do know and can answer your question and really teach you something, when they meet resistance, they'll shut down. They'll say, oh, okay. And let you keep on the path that you're on. And what I know is that anybody who's got a half of a chop in audio, or a decent squabble where they can really throw down, they're not into fighting to teach someone anything. They're not going to fight with you to teach you something. They're not going to argue with you to teach you something. They're just going to say, hey, okay. And a lot of the students that I encounter don't know when to just take it easy for a minute, bro. Take it easy for a minute. Listen to what's being told. And that's what I find most of all. A lot of students become really, really opinionated, and they're excited to use what they know. There's a certain time and place where you just don't say nothing and just let what has to happen around you, no questions asked. And from that, you can learn and grow. The student who walks in the studio day one as an assistant has 20 ideas to share with somebody is usually probably really stepping on that engineer's toes. And you need to know what they're thinking when they're working on something before you can opinionize yourself. So just be quiet, learn, and watch. Stop, look, listen, and if you can do that, you'll learn so much more by the engagement that an engineer has with a client than you'd ever learn if you were interjecting. Even if you have an interjection to make it during the break. Make it during the break. Make it where it's just you and the engineer, and the artist is walking towards the ISO, and then you say, hey, man, what do you think about doing this? And the engineer might say, hey, that's a really great idea, or he might say, no, not right now, and I'll tell you why later.
Sure.
But a lot of times where students block themselves is they're so excited about what they know and want to apply it that they really burn a lot of bridges doing it, and nobody wants to work with them after that.